My husband was in a car accident, and I contacted the company he works for to inform them of what happened. However, they told me something that I totally did not see coming. There was no such employee working for us, ma'am. Are you sure you have the correct name? Yes, ma'am. I'm positive I do. Could you please check again? I just checked, and it seems that he has resigned voluntarily. As to why he did so, I was astonished when the receptionist told me the reason for his resignation. This is the story of how a car accident sent me down the rabbit hole of what my husband was hiding, and upon discovering the truth, how I exacted my revenge on him for the pain he'd caused us. My name is Barbara, and I'm a 32-year-old office employee. I used to live with my husband, Tim. We initially met in high school, but we were never more than friends at school. How we eventually got together was when we met again at a reunion years after we graduated. Perhaps the extra years helped us grow into different people, because we hit it off pretty well and we started dating. After 13 months, we got married. I was actually Tim's first girlfriend, so he had little experience with love and relationships. It was for this precise reason that my friends were worried about this lack of romantic experience. What if he wants to have fun with other girls after getting married? What if he gets pretty controlling and you lose your freedom? These were a few things that my friends would tell me when they warned me about marrying someone with little experience in relationships. But I was confident that Tim would love me and only me forever, so I didn't listen to my friends' words. In fact, we had been married for 2 years and we were always in very pure love with each other. Tim wanted me to stay home as much as possible after we got married, so I resigned from my full-time job and started working part-time instead. I didn't have to work because we could make ends meet on his salary alone. But since we didn't have a child yet, I didn't feel comfortable staying home and doing nothing every day. So I asked him to let me at least work part-time. I was glad I did ask him, and I was still working a good job I enjoyed because it gave me a little time away from home to relax. My daily happiness was always waiting for Tim to come home. I was very happy to put his suit on the hanger every evening when he came home, and then, over dinner, we would talk about the day's events. I was happy every day. More recently, however, instead of the usual small talk about the day, the dinner conversation began to almost entirely consist of his complaints about his workplace. Believe me when I say that his whining and mumbling of dissatisfaction sometimes took hours. He would say that he really didn't like Mr. Kilmer, who was Tim's colleague at work. Apparently, Mr. Kilmer, who had joined the company at around the same time as Tim did, had recently been promoted to section chief. Tim couldn't understand it and was very frustrated. He wanted to be promoted and believed he deserved it because he was working hard at his job. So I could sort of understand his frustration at not being recognized for his efforts. But all the talking about Mr. Kilmer every day made me feel like that he might be a little too obsessed with what he wasn't satisfied with. Oh, honey, I don't think you have anything to worry about. You're also working hard and will be promoted soon. I just know you will. Do you believe that you'll get that promotion if you keep at it? Then leave Kilmer's promotion be and focus on what you want to achieve.
What do you mean by I'm also working hard? Does that mean that even you approve of him, Barbara?
That's not what I meant, honey. Perish the thought.
I can't believe it. I wanted you, of all people, to be on my side.
I am on your side, honey. That's just so obvious. But if Mr. Kilmer did get promoted, it can't be helped now. And all that's left for you now is to continue doing your best too.
Enough with the also and the too. I'm doing better than him. And I hate my company for not acknowledging my contributions well enough.
I only wished that Tim, who got angry when I tried to justify the situation by seemingly implying, even just a little bit, that Kilmer was only promoted before him and that it didn't change all the good he was doing at his company even a little bit, didn't mind all that at all. But I couldn't blame him anyway. Anyone would be a bit shocked that his colleague got promoted first, their efforts appearing the same notwithstanding. So I thought I would at least listen to him more to support him. I grew convinced he didn't want my advice, he just wanted me to listen to his venting. I interpreted it that way and devoted myself to listening to him. 6 months later, Tim told me he was going on a 2-week business trip in another city.
This is an important business trip that could lead to a big promotion.
I see. Well, that's good. I knew you could do it. Good luck, honey. He seemed very happy to hear that it could lead to a big promotion, so evidently I cheered him on. But 2 days after he left on his business trip, I got a call from a hospital. I quickly answered the phone expecting something had happened to one of my parents. So I didn't expect to be told that Tim had been in a car accident on the way to his business trip. and had been rushed to the emergency room. I called my part-time job, explained the situation, and told them that I would not be able to go to work for a while. They agreed and assured me I'd still be welcome to come back after I did what was necessary. I rushed to the hospital, and when I entered his room, I found Tim lying in bed with a cast on his leg. That probably meant he had a broken bone. The doctor told me that he hadn't woken up since he was brought to the hospital, so I became very worried. But I composed myself and thought about what I could do to help. The first decision I came to was that I should inform his company that he'd been in an accident while on the way to a business trip. I took a few deep breaths before I dialed his company's public reception number, and I told the receptionist his name and asked her to connect me to the sales department where he worked. "Of course, ma'am. Please, wait a moment." The tone of her voice was honestly a little strange, because she sounded like she was unsure of something. I had a strange feeling that something about Tim was just not right, and a few minutes later, as I was waiting over the phone, that feeling was sadly justified. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it seems we don't have an employee by the name Timothy Horowitz at this establishment. Are you sure you haven't made a mistake in his name?" "What? I don't think I did. No, his name is Timothy Horowitz, spelled Horowitz, and he has a colleague who was recently promoted by the name of Kilmer. Could you please check again?" I told them that, and they said they would check again, so I went back on hold and waited for a few minutes. Then came a truly unexpected response. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was told that Mr. Timothy Horowitz has resigned voluntarily 2 months ago." "Wait, resigned? I'm sorry. My name is Barbara Horowitz, and I'm Timothy's wife. May I ask why he resigned?" "I'm afraid I have to tell you that he resigned, along with a woman by the name of Flora Nuremberg, because they were both involved in an unfaithful act of adultery within the company." In hindsight, that was pretty straightforward of her, and I now appreciate it. At the moment, though, it was as though someone had slammed my chest with a mallet. I guessed the receptionist must have meant that Tim was fired from his job. But that wasn't all, because the receptionist then went on to say, "There is someone who would like to speak with you over the phone immediately, Mrs. Horowitz." "With me?" "Yes, ma'am. May I put them through?" Yes, please." And I heard the phone patch to another number, and a deep masculine voice flooded my ear.
Good afternoon, Miss Horowitz. My name is Stan Kilmer, and it's a real pleasure. It's a real nice pleasure to meet you.
I was immediately sure this Mr. Kilmer was the same one who worked with my husband.
I asked the receptionist to patch you through to my office because I wanted to talk to you personally. Is this a good time? Of course, if it isn't, you only need to say the word, ma'am.
I was so shocked about what I just heard, and I was feeling tears running down my cheeks. Try as I might, I really couldn't stop crying. I thought to myself, this is not the time to be on the phone with Mr. Kilmer, not yet. And that was because of how mental I was. I responded, "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm in no condition to make a phone call right now."
I'm not surprised, ma'am. I'm sure there are so many things going on in your head right now. Take your time and please let me know when you're able to talk. You're more than welcome to visit my office anytime. Just say my name at the reception desk and I'll be at your service.
"Thank you, sir." I hung up. I then lost all strength in my legs and sat down on the spot. So Tim was having an affair. I couldn't accept the fact that this was the truth and that he'd been fired from his job because of it. There were so many surprises that converged upon me all at once that I couldn't make sense of all the turmoil. And I felt absolutely miserable. I was so glad that Mr. Kilmer was all too kind, though, and that gave me some hope for the future. Just as I was about to leave, because I just couldn't go through with the meeting Tim right then, a nurse came and told me that he was awake. Right then, something inside me changed, and I decided I would see him after all. I was curious as to how he'd act after he'd woken up. Anyway, so I got up and walked to his hospital room. He was sitting up in bed and talking as he usually did. When he saw me coming into his room, his face lit up.
Barbara, honey, you're here. Oh, man, you were so worried about me so much that you started to cry? I'm so sorry, honey.
No, I feel fine, now that I know you look fine too. Come to think of it, I was crying because of my husband, no doubt, but not for the reasons he was interpreting. I wanted to interrogate Tim about the affair and how he got fired from his job, but I knew if I asked him now, he'd try to make excuses and cover it up, and I'd never know the facts. So I decided against demanding answers right then and there. "Are you okay? I'm guessing that cast on your leg means you have..."
A broken leg. Yep, you got that right. But it's not anything serious. The fracture was clean and the skin wasn't open. I feel fine, honey.
"But it's still a serious injury. Don't you think you should call your company to let them know you were in an accident?"
You're right. I'll call them later.
is what he responded, and he had a nonchalant expression on his face. I could only guess my husband was so used to lying to everyone that he could do it without changing his facial expressions. What are you going to do with your belongings at work while you're in the hospital? Do you want me to go to the dormitory and bring some of your stuff?
No, that's all right. I already contacted a colleague of mine from the branch office where I was traveling to bring my stuff for me.
I see. Then I guess I'll go home. I'll be back, honey, I promise. I pretended to be satisfied with the answers he gave me and left the hospital room. But instead of going home, I waited for someone in the hospital lobby. Someone very particular. I was waiting for Tim's partner in adultery, Flora Nuremberg. I was sure that he must have lied about contacting a colleague on a business trip, and that she must be bringing my husband's baggage herself. So I decided to lay in wait to catch a glimpse of any clues from a woman in the lobby and capture the evidence myself. A few minutes later, a woman appeared with a very recognizable Boston bag. It was the same bag that Tim had taken on his business trip. I quickly made the decision she must be going to my husband's hospital room, and I followed her. I peeked into the corridor that eventually led to Tim's hospital room, and lo and behold, I saw her open the curtains to the same room I walked out of a couple minutes ago and walk through the doorway inside. I moved a little closer to confirm any lingering doubt. Maybe she really was just a colleague, and I made a stupid assumption that his colleague was a man. Maybe this colleague couldn't come for some last-minute important reason and asked this woman to bring Tim his belongings instead. But what I heard next confirmed what I feared the most.
You're here. I was so worried about you, Flora. I'm so glad you're safe. I'm the happiest, strongest man in the world as long as I can protect you, sweetheart.
I wanted to protect you, Timothy, darling. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything.
Oh, don't you dare. You're so sweet, darling.
Not only did I hear their lovey-dovey conversation, but I also heard the shuffling of some pieces of cotton fabric. From what I could hear, I came to the conclusion that not only was Tim with this woman when the accident happened, but that he was very much in love with her. I recorded the conversation between him and his lover on a voice memo app on my phone and went home. The next day I went to his former office and asked for someone in particular. Who was that person, you ask? Well, allow me to introduce him.
Sorry to keep you waiting, ma'am. Nice to finally meet you in person. My name is Stan Kilmer.
The pleasure's all mine, Mr. Kilmer. I've heard a lot about you from my husband, and I must admit, much of what he said isn't exactly of good nature. It was Tim's old colleague, Stan Kilmer, the same individual who wanted to speak with me over the phone. I thought he must know something about the affair, and that's why I came to his office. He was a giant of a man, and if a child told me he found Bigfoot after seeing Mr. Kilmer, I would honestly agree with them. He looked like an authentic Maori tribesman. Perhaps a tad more overweight, with long frazzled black hair, a huge beard, and traditional Maori tattoos dawning his forearms. Picture a more tanned Hagrid from Harry Potter, and you'd get pretty darn close to Stan. But while he had the body of someone who could snap someone like me as easily as a toothpick, his heart was so much bigger, and his kind personality commanded such an attractive aura. I got the feeling that if he opened his mouth, anything from a deep lesson in life to the darkest of black humor could emerge. But I would love to listen in any case.
I have something to tell you, ma'am, but I'm sure this isn't the best place to talk.
So we went to a nearby cafe, and upon sitting down and ordering drinks, Stan suddenly apologized to me.
I'm so sorry, Miss Horowitz. I'm sure you know about the affair, don't you?
Yes, I do know about it.
I'm ashamed to admit that I believe he's having an affair with my wife.
I was very surprised. I had no idea that Tim would have the audacity to have an affair with someone who was already married. Stan was not divorced yet at that point, but he admitted he was seriously considering it. I asked him where his wife was, and he told me that she was on a business trip. I was so sure of everything by this point that I felt foolish for worrying about it in the first place.
So, what are you going to do now, Barbara?
I'm obviously getting a divorce.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and that's made my mind up as well. I had the hunch you were thinking of getting a divorce, so I took the liberty of bringing you all the evidence I have. I hired a detective agency, you see, and they came back with the jackpot.
Thank you so much, sir. In that case, I'll send you the voice recording I took yesterday. I played the voice memo I recorded yesterday for Stan. As the seconds turned into minutes, he grew increasingly angry. But then he smiled and said,
Let's take what we can get.
And went a little silly with the schemes he was planning. Most of them were jokes, but some of them gave us some ideas about how we would proceed from here on out. I told him that Tim was in the hospital and that Flora was visiting him every day. We eventually devised a plan where we would storm his hospital room once Stan was off work. However, it would have been meaningless if we did not enter the hospital room when Flora wasn't there. So we decided to wait for her to arrive at the hospital lobby and enter the room when I knew for sure she would be there. And the time finally came. While I was waiting in the lobby, Flora came into the hospital with a stride that looked as though she was on top of the world. She must be so excited to see her darling Timothy. We followed her to his room, and we opened the curtains as wide as we could and charged into the room. He was startled, and the wife let out a little scream. I think we should talk to each other as our own couples from here onward. This is a hospital room, and it's not a good idea to have a fight here.
I couldn't agree more, Barbara.
After saying so, Stan marched right up to his cowering wife and started pulling her away. Hey, Tim, darling, help me. He's going to take me away. I don't want to go. I want to be with you. But Tim coldly shooed her away.
Get the hell out of here already.
With a sad look on her face, Flora disappeared into the corridor. Taken by the arm, that was the last I saw of them that day.
You trying to switch to Kilmer, huh?
The hell?
That's why you came with him, right? You're going with him now, right?
There's no way I would do that, Mr. Horowitz. Not after what you did. I'm sure my husband wasn't coldly rejecting Flora, but was angry that I had come with Stan at my side. He'd probably made the stupid assumption that he and I were together. When I denied it, he started smiling and blabbing on and on and on about the supposed nature of the affair.
That's good. I really didn't like him anyway. That's why I seduced his wife. I wanted to see his sad, miserable face, you see? I was jealous because you were always on his side, and that's precisely why I used his wife to make him suffer.
Is what he was saying, a smug look on his face all the while.
Flora and I got fired from the company together, but she is hopelessly in love with me. She's now working at a cabaret club to pay for our living expenses. She's literally paying everything for me. Frickin' Kilmer's gonna be so shocked when he finds out how committed his precious wife was to her relationship with me. He might actually cry. Don't worry. I'll work when I get better, and I'll also leave Flora.
He's actually laughing as he says so. I was utterly disgusted by the sight of the monstrosity that lay before me. Please divorce me.
Wait, what? Why? I didn't cheat with Flora because I felt like cheating on you. I cheated with her because I had no other choice to make him hit rock bottom.
Yeah, I can't accept that kind of inhumanity. I can't be with someone who plans schemes to bring people down. When I said that, Tim kept on talking, pleadingly with tears streaming down his face.
Why are you saying such things, darling? What did I do to you? I didn't do anything wrong.
Crying won't change my wishes to divorce you, bucko. Besides, how can you say you did nothing wrong after all the pain you've caused? I never want to see your face again. With that, I started to leave the hospital room. Then Tim, who was badly injured, threw himself out of bed and fell face down on the ground. He still crawled over to me and grabbed my ankle.
I swear to you, my love, it really wasn't an affair. It was revenge, and...
You have got to be kidding me. What are you talking about? You destroyed families. Yes, plural. It's not just Stan's family that you ruined, but ours too. What kind of revenge is that? You're so selfish. Your pride is the reason you can't get ahead in life. I shake his hand away and leave the room. He was rubbing his head against the ground and crying, almost screaming, but I didn't think anything of it. Then I went to the lawyer's office. I was thinking of filing a claim for alimony, but I was told that since Mr. Horowitz was now unemployed, I couldn't do that. I left the lawyer's office and called my parents-in-law, and when I told them what had happened, they generously said they would pay their son's alimony on his behalf. Mr. Horowitz started working as soon as he got out of the hospital, and they made him sign a written letter of consent to pay back the money he owed his parents. They told me this when they delivered the alimony to me, and the divorce went through without a hitch. Stan's divorce with Flora was also finalized. Thereafter, Mr. Horowitz tried to reach out to Flora to start over, but she remembered how he had coldly rejected her in the hospital room, and she no longer had any interest in him, and now they're arguing about returning the money she had given him as living expenses. As for me, I'm very happy with my new life on my own. I quit my part-time job and started working at a new company as a full-time employee. It's a big change in environment, and I have to start from scratch, but I'm going to enjoy my new life again.